Good morning, everyone. You're all very welcome to this morning's EuroSTAR, sponsored by HP and EDS and HP Company. Today's webinar is titled Exploring the Relationships Between Testing, ROI Testing, Risk and Testing Maturity, and is presented by Howles of HP and EDS and HP Company. Following today's presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. So please feel free throughout the webinar to ask a question using the Question and Answers Manager. Select the Question and Answer tab on the top left-hand of your screen. There you can type your question and press Enter. Your question will then go into a list to be answered following Ian's presentation this morning. So now I will firstly hand you over to Colin. Good morning, Colin.
Good morning. Hi, well, my name is Colin, Robb. I'm Product Marketing Director for Application Lifecycle Management. I just want to spend a couple of minutes introducing today's webinar to put it into the context of what we're doing with HP at the moment. Hopefully all of you on the call, and by the way, thank you very much for so many attending today. Hopefully all of you are aware that HP acquired EDS just coming up to a year ago now. And we're working very closely together. EDS is keeping the EDS brand, but part of HP now. And Ian is from EDS. I just want to introduce a little bit about how EDS are fitting into what we're doing within HP. So first of all, HP software. I'm from HP Software and Services, and we cover the whole of IT and software for the whole of IT management. And we see IT as split into three distinct phases: planning, development, and production. Development there is quite a big word. It includes design, development, and testing, and QA, and so on as well. And across those three phases, we see three separate domains within the IT organization. Strategy is all about really product portfolio management and demand management, and IT financial management, and so on. Then at the bottom, the operations stack, predominantly about running systems within production, but operations obviously have a part to play within the development phase and within the planning phase. And in the middle, the applications section, and this is the area that we're concerned with today, managing an application from cradle to grave, from inception to retirement. And this we call application lifecycle management. So we are promoting application lifecycle management, or ALM, which hopefully many of you will have heard of. Now, today's webinar is very much focused on testing, as is the EuroSTAR conference, of course, and that is very specifically within this phase of ALM. But I want to make it clear that there's more to ALM than just the testing and QA part. And the offerings that we have from HP cover both planning and the production phases of applications. So obviously all the policy and governance aspects of application design and so on, security policies and things in the planning phase, and the management of applications in production, their performance against service levels and so on, are the two areas outside of the development phase that we cover. But today is very much going to be around testing and QA. And we're very, very happy to have brought EDS on board to HP, because predominantly prior to that we were more of a product company with testing and QA products acquired from Mercury a couple of years ago. And we did some services, but we've brought in a much stronger services offering by the acquisition of EDS, who are very strong in the testing services domain. So with our industry-leading tools, and now with EDS on the services side, we believe that we really have a very strong offering today. Without further ado, I would like to introduce today's main presenter, Ian Howles. And just before Ian starts, I'd like to just mention that we have a second of these webinars in October, 6th of October, which will be run by John Foder, who's also from EDS now, and the name that hopefully many of you will be familiar with. But today's speaker, Ian Howles, and I'll let Ian introduce himself, and with no further ado, hand over to Ian. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Colin. Right, hi everyone. Thanks very much for attending. Before I actually start, for anybody who does know me, the only way to make me look thin is to squeeze that picture these days. So, I'm Ian Howles. I've been in sort of testing for far too many years now. Started when I was 16 and now I'm getting very old. So I've been doing this for a fairly long time, and I work for a number of large consulting organizations. I'm currently at EDS, an HP company. I've been involved in most of the SDLC lifecycle project phases and in testing teams of sizes from 1 to hundreds. So I've got a number of years' experience. So, what can we expect from today? Okay, what I want to do today, and as the title says, it's explore the integration or the interaction between risk, return on investment, and maturity. So I'd like you to be able to take away from today three things. And I want you to go away and explore in your organizations, for your clients, etc. What is it the risk that you're mitigating? How much are you spending on mitigating that risk? And does that represent value? Okay. Okay. The next thing to say is I don't have all the answers. And this deck it highlights some ideas, and I'd like to thank many, many peers, past and present, who I've worked with, who I've been out and had beers with, who have helped formulate the ideas in this. To name a few, Dot Graham, Susan Herrick, Graham Babel, Andreas, John Foley, Colin, Robb, and a guy I used to work with a few years back, Neil Thompson. Okay. So today's agenda, I want to do a quick recap on what is risk-based testing. It's not a talk on RBT, just a quick recap on what it is. A quick recap on maturity and the different types, and a quick recap on return on investment, and then look at the relationships between those three. Okay, so risk-based testing, a recap. Let's first start with a definition. What is risk-based testing? What is risk? Risk is a problem that might happen. The more likely the problem is to happen, the likelihood, and the more cost, the impact it will have if it happens. You can read that. Therefore, testing is always and should always be motivated by risk. Okay. So I can hear the question is, well, isn't all testing risk-based? And the answer to that is yes. But it's based on context. Okay, and hopefully everybody here is familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And Maslow states that we all need basic needs such as food, water, shelter to be met to meet our psychological needs. And that's before we can progress to the next level, in this instance, safety. But that's based upon a context that A, we're human beings, B, we have a desire for living, C, we're on the planet Earth. What if those contextual things are different? The risk changes. The needs change. So, for example, let's take the instance where we are human beings. We do still have a desire for life, but now we're on the moon. Food and shelter are not our first psychological needs. Okay? Air, warmth are. So we change the context depending on the risk. Okay. So, having said that, if all testing is risk-based, and we need to add the context, how do we do it? I'm just going to give a very basic example here of how we can establish a common reference framework to mitigate the risk. In this example, I've called it a business process hierarchy, and generating it via collaboration between the business users, the development community, and the testing community. And this is a collaborative approach. Okay. This allows for organisations, any size, to take on their own risk characteristics. Many organisations have different risk characteristics depending upon their context. Some will be very risk averse. Some will be very risk gung-ho. So by employing a collaborative nature for the process of establishing a common risk framework, you can actually have shared ownership of the understanding of the risk and the context of the risk of the business processes that need to be translated into IT solutions. Okay. So let's say we've highlighted the business process hierarchy, and it looks a little bit like this. So once we have determined that, we can then overlay the risk on top of our hierarchy. Okay, and again, this is all a collaborative exercise about analysing the business impact. So looking at the business process hierarchy and analysing the impact, understanding whether it's high, medium, low, what's the type of process, etc. Assess the business impact for each activity. Then analysing the probability of failure. Okay, again, is it unlikely? Is it probable? Is it likely? So, is it going to break? And what's the impact? Okay? And from those two things, we can actually determine the risk. Okay? We can determine the likelihood and the impact. And that gives us a collaborative understanding of every activity within the business process. And we understand the risk in the context that is meant to be understood and delivered. Okay, so we've identified the risk profile. What can we do about it? We're always told to test the high-risk areas first, but what does it mean? Okay, does that mean we run system testing and we do the high probability ones first? Yes, but it means so much more than that. There are so many activities that can take place throughout the software development lifecycle that can be used as preventative actions to mitigate risk early rather than later. For example, inspections, ambiguity removal. All of these are topics that have been covered before and will be covered again and would probably be a whole webinar in their own. So suffice to say that we're just going to look at risk, the mitigation of risk throughout the life cycle, the earlier the better, within this context. Okay, so that was just a little recap on RBT. I'm going to do a little recap on maturity. Okay, there are many different and some would say competing maturity methods, which are either wholly focused on testing or include testing. For example, TMMI, TPI, SPICE, CMM, CMMI, and there are others. But in general, they have one thing in common. They identify the current maturity of the project, program, organization, and highlight areas that should lead to the project, program, organization in question down a process improvement path. That path will lead to better, more efficient, and more effective product quality based against perceived industry standards. But what is an industry standard? What's a best practice? Again, this is a topic for another discussion, but let's just say that context needs to be applied to maturity in the same way as risk. Okay. We also need to understand some of the issues. Process improvement, maturity improvement requires investment. Investment to undertake the identification, investment to implement the improvements. Those have to be offset against those savings. You need to realize those savings and return to profit. So utilizing something very similar to Maslow's hierarchy, maturity can also be put into context. And this was a model that was developed by a couple of people from EDS, Graham Bale and Susan Herrick, to highlight the fact that the same as in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's a natural order of progression from one level of testing maturity to the next, and certain criteria need to be fulfilled before you can progress, and they can be categorized broadly as cost and structure, measurement and control, productivity and cost reduction, before you mature at the fully optimizing with business value and continuous improvement. Okay. So, we've got a quick recap on the return on investment piece now. And hopefully, I'll assume that everybody has seen this or something very similar to it. I've used this picture to re-emphasize that the earlier a defect is detected, effective testing, and corrected, then the cheaper it becomes to deliver the product. This is just one of many reasons that organizations, projects, move to different ways of developing software, such as incremental, iterative, and agile. Suffice to say, it's all about defect cost reduction. Okay. So, to reiterate the previous slide and add a little bit more, we can show where defects are detected. Okay? The actual cost, we can show the relative cost to fix the defect as well. The actual cost of the defect is the product of where they're detected and the cost to fix them. Okay, and that can be shown in that type of graph there. So by applying the fix defects early mentality, okay, so where we can actually reduce the defects so they're introduced early, removing them early, can give us a ideal cost of defect removal. Okay, defect detection. In which, again, this leads people to different ways of working, to agile ways of working, to implementing different types of static techniques, things such as inspections, etc., early in the life cycle. So let's remember, time's money. Okay, so the data in this study that I've got the figures from here stem from a large real-time software project consisting of about 700,000 lines of code developed by over 400 people. The time saved by the processing is the time that would have been spent if the process had not been performed and faults had to be corrected later. The time-saving results found in this study are shown here. The results indicate that for every hour spent in design reviews and correcting design faults, more than 8 hours of work are saved. The time benefits from the testing phase itself are remarkably low. This is not really surprising, since a lot of time is wasted during the actual testing phase of any project in performing tests that do not reveal results. As an aside, the figure of 8 hours saved for every hour invested is also borne out in inspection. Dr. Graham's inspection book gives a study done of 1,000 defects by Trevor Reeve, who found it saved 9.3 hours on average. So 8.3 hours saved, subtracting the hour invested in conducting the inspection. These findings once more confirm the statement that early testing really does pay off And remember, time is money. So now to the relationships. Okay. Let's look at a very familiar relationship, hopefully, that's used to deliver an effective project. That three major items: cost, quality, and time need to be balanced. There is a point of view that I first became aware of by listening to Neil Thompson a number of years ago at one of the EuroSTAR conferences that suggests scope can be added and should be added to that triangle to form a three-dimensional tetrahedron. I very much agree with this view and would recommend that unless you understand the scope of what is needed to be delivered, how can you understand the other 3 points? You don't understand the cost, the time, or the quality until you can understand the scope. So now to the crux of this sort of webinar. Is there a fixed relationship between risk, return on investment, and maturity, such as we've seen between cost, quality, and time? Or is it just a variable relationship? Or is it just coincidence? And does scope play a part here? Or is it intrinsically covered in one or all of the other items? Let's first look at maturity against risk. And I like the picture here. It says you're only young once, but childish behaviour can last a lifetime. And I've seen a lot of it in my lifetime so far. But an immature organisation does not understand the risk of what they're doing, and as such are probably not effective or efficient in their testing processes. I would suggest that they're either spending way too much on product quality, so they've got little risk, little impact of failure, or they're spending way too little on product quality and get by with the grace and favour of their current users or their market dominance. Either way, it's definitely not effective or efficient testing process or practice. I'd suggest this is where scope falls into the model, as until scope is understood, the context of risk cannot be fully agreed. But I'm happy to discuss that with anyone. In stark contrast to an immature organisation, a fully mature organisation, for example an organisation that has achieved CMMI level 5 and is working that way on a day-to-day basis, and it's not just a badge, will understand the scope of delivery. They'll understand the risk and impact of failure. They will direct their activities where they are necessary to minimise the impact of failure to achieve the desired scope. These organisations often strive for maturity level recognition, and those that strive for the highest level of all maturity tend to be either in or supporting critical operations where the cost of failure could and probably would result in the loss of life. Next, we're going to look at risk versus return on investment. If risk's not understood, how can we determine if value is being realised for the client? For example, we detected 100 defects in system testing. Is that good? Is it bad? Is it indifferent? Do we care? Okay. We need to look at it in context. It's that context word again. 100 out of 110 defects would be good in the context of that's before we've gone live. But if we then discover another 1,000 defects in the first 2 weeks of live production, the context has changed again. The risk has changed. Okay, doesn't look so good now, does it? In contrast, if a project, program, organisation fully understands the risks to be mitigated, mitigated via verification, validation, and the impact of failure of any piece of the solution jigsaw, the project will and can highlight the value that has been delivered by their V&V testing processes and the teams throughout the software development lifecycle. That's all the teams. And also, they will understand the failure cost that the business has mitigated in real terms, pounds, dollars, euros, whatever it happens to be. Finally, let's look at maturity versus return on investment. The key to this last slide of the relationship of the triangle is that highly mature organizations will and do understand where to spend their investment budgets. They understand where to spend them in order to maximize the return on investment of their verification and validation process. This not only means that they understand the risk profile and the impact of failure, but also where additional investment in people, process, tools will either help to maintain their current maturity or improve the efficiency and effectiveness of their product quality lifecycle. For example, the latest version of a tool may bring efficiency gains. The introduction of a new process technique may bring effectiveness. They will understand where to apply that investment and what return they will get. So, in conclusion, does the triangle need to balance? Okay. I believe I've demonstrated that there's a clear relationship between the 3 points of the triangle: risk, return on investment, and maturity. And they're intrinsically linked. You cannot improve one without considering the others. So the question is, do we need to have them balanced? Does the triangle need to be equilateral? There's many complex interdependencies that are rarely exposed to ensure that the simple test early, reduce costs mantra is met. I believe in most circumstances that they do not need to be balanced. Okay? But it does help. There's no financial point in being a highly mature organization if the risk of failure of your product is non-existent. Okay? Like in any good marriage, don't take these relationships for granted. The key is for all of us to understand what is the correct balance for our clients, our organizations, and strive to make the best of what we can achieve for that aim. So remember, we need to be able to understand, 1, what is the risk that you're mitigating? 2, how much are you spending on mitigating that risk? And 3, does that financial spend represent value for money? I've added a few slides of references where some of this material has come from. The first one here, I thoroughly recommend people having a look at these. There's some good books, there's some really good sites here that help with these concepts that I've been talking about. And again, with this slide here, all of these references have contributed to the definition and evolution of risk-based testing process at HP and EDS, and I'd highly recommend all of them. Okay. So, Are there any questions? And please remember, I don't have all the answers. This deck's highlighted some ideas and models, but I'm happy to discuss. Thank you.
Hi Ian, we have one question here, and it's from Ian. He'd like to add his contribution to Paul Gerard, Chris Omi of TSG, for the scope idea and numerous agile authors.
Okay. Yes, I can't argue with that. Those people, as I said, there's many people I've spoken to. Chris Comey is one, and Paul Gerard is another that I'm going to have to thank as well. Yeah.
We have also another question from Chris Clement. This is wonderful theory, but have you any real-life examples in the testing world that you would like applied to this?
Chris, yes. In answer, this is the theory, but this is the practical way that we undertake testing within EDS and HP company. So we do apply these contextual ways of working, the business process hierarchies, the risk mitigation activities to all projects, some in a more or lesser degree depending on the contextual nature, but yes, we do apply it.
Do you have any more questions? We don't seem to have any more questions, Ian.
Okay.
Colin, would you like to add a few words?
Yeah, just one more question coming in actually. Just pass that back over to you.
Okay, it's from Michael Blue. Should risk be managed by testing staff or project staff, ideally?
Hi, Michael. Thanks for the question. I would suggest that, and the way that personally I've worked it, it's a collaborative event. So whoever runs the risk database, the risk log, whatever it happens to be, that's really immaterial. The key to managing those risks and the identification of those risks is the collaborative way of working, so bringing them together. So it is testing staff, it is project staff, it is your developers, it is your requirements analysts. It's almost agile in nature, but can be applied to any development life cycle. So whoever actually manages those risks is fairly immaterial, because that's an admin type role. It's the actual identification and working through and the contextual nature of those risks that needs to be understood, and that's a collaborative thing. Hopefully that's answered your question.
Okay. Just waiting for some more questions to come in. No? Okay, Colin.
Okay. So, yeah, well, so I'd like to thank everyone very much for their attendance today. Had quite a high number in the end. I'd like to thank Ian very much for the presentation, very interesting. And I'd like to remind you that Ian actually has a workshop that follows on from this at EuroSTAR 2009 in Sweden. Maybe I'll give Ian a little moment in a second just to introduce that. But also just to remind you that we have a second webinar, EuroSTAR webinar, sponsored by HP on the 6th of October, which will be presented by John Foder. It would be great if you could join for that. I don't have the title to hand at this moment, but I'm sure it would be very interesting for anyone that's heard John speak. So just briefly pass it in, maybe just to introduce your session at EuroSTAR, just to say how it follows on from today, and otherwise, thank you very much for your attendance.
Thanks very much, Colin. I'd like to reiterate that. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Yes, I do have a conference workshop on the Wednesday at EuroSTAR. It's called Spend Wisely, Test Well, and it does follow on from this webinar in that it takes these basic principles and practices and then applies them in a business nature. So, and it is based around a case study. So it is a workshop. People are expected to do some activities during that workshop. So, yeah, feel free, come along. It's the next step to this. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all today for taking the time out to be with us. And a recorded version of today's webinar will be sent to you in the coming days. Will it be available up on our webinar archive on the EuroSTAR website? Can you all ensure now to log out as the webinar has now finished?